Alright, so this time I wanted to take a look at something a little different than I have been for the past couple of videos. I want to take a look at something really small. One of those very small games that often kind of, it never appears on the Steam top sellers, it never gets a huge number of articles, and it never really, has like millions of sales or anything. But that's one of the things that I like to do when I first started out, and it's something I need to do more often. And I had a chance with this game called Gift of Parthax. Gift of Parthax is I suppose it's best described as an arena-based, kind of like an arena-based shooter of old, only instead of guns, you were using magic. And it feels very much like one of those older titles. In fact, it kind of looks and plays like something that could be on the Amiga or an earlier DOS game. That's very much the sort of vibe that I get from it, and I think that's deliberate. I'm pretty sure that they're trying for that kind of feel, and it actually succeeds quite well. The way the aiming and the movement works, the way that the actual graphical style looks, and the way that everything operates is very much in the vein of games like that from quite a while ago. And I think it even uses that theme so deeply that just the mechanics in general mirror games of that age, by which I mean it's not complicated at all. It's very straightforward, very simple. You go in arenas themed after seasons, with each one sort of encompassing an element, and you fight in an arena battle with your loadout that you've chosen until either you die or you win, and then you move on to the next one, and every 5th level is a boss, a pretty difficult boss battle actually. This game gets quite challenging. It starts out very easy to understand, but then after a couple of levels in, pretty much after the first boss, it really starts to hit you with the difficulty, because you can probably see in the background that there's quite a lot going on, and your base movement speed is fairly low, and you do have a dash, but it's on quite a cooldown, so you can't just dash all over the place constantly. Some people, because of the customizing magic theme and all that, may be, I suppose, tempted to compare this to something like Wizard of Legend, but it's nothing like that at all. Whereas Wizard of Legend is a much more new school game in the roguelite sort of genre, this is not like that at all. It is very old school and very simple, but I don't think that's a bad thing. So the way that it works is you have a selection of 4 spells and an arch spell on the right mouse button, which is basically an incredibly powerful spell that charges up as you kill things, and eventually you can use it. And you can put anything in your loadout into these 4 slots, or well, 5 slots counting the arch spell, and you will get more and more spells in your repertoire by actually completing these sort of arena missions. And each one gives you a spell that is based on that arena's theme. So this particular blue one here is Fall, as you saw, which is based on lightning, which is called the arcane element. So every time you beat one of those, you will get a new arcane spell, and so on and so forth. This is the summer arena, which is of course fire-based, and you get fire spells from this one. So it's, it's very straightforward, and essentially you're building an arsenal of spells to use however you wish, and actually be able to navigate the more difficult battles by, using weaknesses and customizing the spells. And the spell customization comes in the form of runes, which is probably the most interesting part of the game on a base level. The runes come in many, many categories, and the categories oftentimes overlap on purpose, so that you can use multiple categories of runes on a single spell and make it very strong. Every spell, as you'll see a little bit later, has 4 rune slots, except for the arch spell, which it can't be customized because it's just meant to be one powerful thing. And you can get these various runes in order to, I suppose, make your own customized loadout for each mission. And they come in various categories, from things like ones that affect specifically projectile spells, or ones that affect specifically summon spells, to ones that just affect any spell of a single element, like fire or frost. And this allows you to, like I mentioned earlier, actually combine several categories into one spell and make it really, really strong. It may up the mana cost though, so be careful. For instance, the main projectile that I'm using is actually fire and earth based, so it can use both fire and earth runes as well as projectile runes, because it fires up projectiles. So all 3 of those categories are available to customize it with, and the more of them that you buy, as you can see, you're getting gold for actually fighting in the arena. You use this gold to buy the runes from a shopkeep after each fight, which is very old school. And You can get anything from the volley rune, which I'm using, which allows any projectile spell to fire multiple projectiles, which is very useful, although it of course does decrease its accuracy somewhat because it's like a spread shot instead of a single precise projectile. And anything on the fire runes, like say a burn rune, which obviously gives a spell a chance to do fire damage over time, or some fun earth stuff like the ability to stun, which is very, very useful. So, you know, a multi-shot burning stun earth spike is basically what I'm using, or magma spike, I suppose. It's basically what I'm using for my main spell, and you can just mix and match these 4 rune slots to your heart's content and make something ridiculous. Or try. For instance, in this particular area, the third spell that I have is a sort of flame nova, and it has runes for everything from restoring MP for everything that gets hit, to actually upping the cost at the expense of upping the cost. It does more damage more quickly. It hits multiple times in quick succession, which you can obviously see the synergy between those two things. So effectively you're creating an arsenal of synergized spells for a particular elemental arena that will allow you to get through it alive. There are also potions, of course, as you can probably see, but they are limited in terms of how many you can get quickly because they cost, and they also don't restore a huge amount of their particular resource very quickly. It takes a while. They're not like a giant boost of sudden health for the health potion. It's more like a slight trickle. So you do have to be a bit careful. And as you can see here, I got some other runes for various things, like for instance the polymorph rune there, which affects anything that's arcane elemental, from traps to summons to anything, and occasionally they will turn things into chickens, which is great. Any game that allows me to turn something into a chicken is probably a good game. But yeah, it is very, you know, you've come across games like, well, in the past, you've come across games like Robotron and things like that, these sort of arena-based, slowly upgrade yourself, non-meta kind of shooters and combat arena games. Non-meta, by which I mean it's not like a roguelite or anything. You don't have any sort of meta currency or multiple run-throughs or anything like that. It's very simple. And this game very much does, in fact, do all of that. Which I like, because even though I'm a huge fan of more meta progression, roguelites, that sort of thing, I don't want every game to be that way, and it's kind of refreshing to see a game that does things very differently in a way that actually isn't done very often anymore. Maybe because they feel, or some developers feel, that it's a bit too simple for today's audience, which I don't think is the case. As long as the gameplay is satisfying, the difficulty ramps up properly, and there is a fair amount of stuff for you to do, that's really not too simple. It's just straightforward, and there is an important distinction to be made there, I feel. So Gift of Parthax very much does, I suppose, scratch an itch that I wasn't sure if I actually had, but it's kind of cool to actually see it, because, you know, those very old games that I used to play a lot when I was a kid often had mechanics and just a general feel of this. Games like this are something that came out on, you know, those multi-disc kind of formats and a couple of other things, and they weren't ever really huge successes for the most part, besides a couple of very big names that you'll definitely know, like I said, Robotron and things like that. But these games were very popular for a time back in the early 90s and a bit before and a bit after, because of their simplicity to just jump in, play a little bit. You don't have to worry about a story that you need to remember where you are in. You don't have to worry about like role-playing mechanics to any sort of large degree that makes you plan out a whole lot or anything like that. And there's, of course, a place for games like that, but I wanna say that there's still a place for games without those things. And in a time where a lot of games feel the need to cram in a bunch of mechanics, even if they don't necessarily fit, just because they're popular, it's nice to see games that that do things in an old way that is still as fun as it was back then, because we all liked games back then, not because of any particular reason other than they were fun, oftentimes. And I think that it's still okay to make a game in those images if they're, you know, fun, if they have enough content to justify their price, and they just remind us of the things we used to like. And it's not really a nostalgia bait kind of thing, because even if no one had nostalgia, I think the proper distinction is that if you don't have nostalgia for that time, you can still find them fun. And I think that's the case here. I have had a couple of problems with the game that I feel it's definitely worth mentioning. A couple of bugs. There was a recent patch, actually just today, at the time of recording, that fixed most of them. But I did have a problem occasionally with the spellbook showing blank pages and refusing to let me do anything. That's of course not in battle because you can't use the spellbook in battle, but it was annoying. I had to restart the game to fix that. It happened to me twice. And I've also had occasional problems with any sort of alt-tabbing or using the Steam overlay or things like that, like the Shift-Tab overlay. It really doesn't like it. This is not a game that likes that sort of thing, so if you try to do that, it may result in the game crashing, or if you're me, it results in the game freezing up, although you can still hear the music and the sound of your character moving around and stuff like that, but the actual screen isn't doing anything, and you have to exit the game and restart, generally speaking, to fix this. Other than that, I don't think I've had any major problems with it, but that was definitely annoying when it happened. However, like I said, there was a patch just today that fixed most of those, except for the Alt-Tab one. I've had, any other problem that I've had with it has been solved, except for that specific one. Maybe if I ran it in, like, a window, obviously that wouldn't be as much of an issue. But, just something I figured I would mention. So, yeah, that's basically my opinion of Gift of Parthax. A quick and simple video because it's a quick and simple game that is one of your old-school arena-based kind of, almost like a shmup, I guess, but magic-themed. And it does what it needs to do pretty well. I think it understands what it actually wants to be. It's not really trying to be like a nostalgia trip or anything like that. It just wants to be a game in a pretty simple old vein, and that's all it really wanted, and it therefore does it quite well because it's not really trying to be anything more. It's something to play in between larger games, something to play when you just have like a coffee break style game, things like that. It can be done quite quickly. Even the more difficult arena battles are usually done in about 5 minutes or less, and it's something that you can just jump into, play for a little while, get some new stuff, arm yourself with new customized spell loadout for excitement, play a few rounds, and then leave, and come back later. So I think there's something to be said for a market of simpler games like that still exist, and I think it's a good thing that they do. Also, of course, it helps that the price is just as cheap and cheerful as the game itself. It's about $10, so you can hop on Steam in the link below this video and nab it for $10 and see if you like it or not. I think it harkens back to a different time, I guess you could say, and although I definitely don't want every game to do that, it's nice when games do it successfully rather than in a, hey, remember this, guys, kind of way that's sometimes annoying. So, yeah, it knows what it is, and it doesn't want to be anything more than that. Pretty fun Magic Arena style of game that doesn't cost too much to try out. So that's Gift of Parthax. I was kind of surprised because I didn't know exactly what it was going to be going into it. I knew it involved, customizing magic, and I try to play in a game that does that because that's really fun for me. But once I actually got into it and saw what it was, I was pretty impressed with the feel that I got from it. So thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.